John Stossel of Fox News and Fox Business is going to attack government regulation and FEMA on Fox and Friends. Let's watch.
Well, ever feel like government makes too many plans that come to naught? Well, John Stossel says that's not a coincidence. It's time for the government to be more spontaneous. Watch this.
Suppose you'd never seen a skating rink and I told you I want to lay down some ice and I'm going to charge people money to strap sharp blades to their feet. And they're going to zip around on the ice. Young and old, skilled and unskilled. And my only rule is go counterclockwise.
Well, it turns out that crazing ice skating rink idea actually works. So should government take a hint and back off a little bit? Joining us now from our sister network, Fox Business, is John Stossel. John, thanks for joining us. It's kind of a bold idea. You're saying that not every human activity needs to be planned from above. Some sort of spontaneously work themselves out pretty well.
Frederick Hayek called it the spontaneous order. This is how most of life works. And if you hadn't seen the skating rink, you would say, no, you need skating police, need someone to say, you people go in this direction. We tried that. We made it worse. People fall down. Learning this changed my life, what I have on this show tonight. And this just... think of how much of life is spontaneous. The family, language. We had one planned language, Esperanto. The intellectuals said, this will make it better. It'll be simpler. Nobody speaks it. Jazz, there's no direction. So much of life is spontaneous, but our instinct is to say, government, give us a plan. Government must do that.
And you cite natural disasters as a good example here, and you really plan for that.
Well, after Katrina, Walmart and private charities help people in many more ways than FEMA did. Because FEMA is incompetent, because government tends to be. But also Walmart every day needs to know what people need. And they were ready. They have more weather forecasters than some of the local governments do.
So ban FEMA because Walmart. How can anybody be silly enough to think that Walmart would seriously take over all of the things that FEMA does? To give you a basic understanding here of just how much FEMA did in both cases, they spent $120.5 billion on the Gulf region post-Hurricane Katrina. $120.5 billion. Is that something that Walmart is going to do voluntarily? How exactly would the profit motive fit into that? Could you imagine having that conversation, the board having that conversation? Hey guys, should we take $120.5 billion and say, fuck our bottom line, fuck profit, fuck the workers, fuck everything, let's just go ahead and give it to the Gulf because of Hurricane Katrina? Inconceivable! So there's no way you can say Walmart or any for-profit company can replace FEMA. The point of a for-profit company is to make profit! Now, I'm not demonizing that. Sometimes it makes sense to have a profit motive. There's no problem with that. But to pretend like in that lane that they get to cross over into our lane, no, stay in your lane. FEMA has its own lane. It's supposed to respond to emergencies. Walmart is better if you want to buy toilet paper and goldfish. Again, the fact that he uses that talking point and thinks it's convincing is amazing. Now, also on Hurricane Sandy, they spent $4 billion and counting so far, according to the CBO. Is any private company going to spend $4 billion to try to rebuild a region after a hurricane? Of course not. And if you say, well, there should be private insurance that deals with this stuff, well, there was a time when the government wanted private insurance to deal with a lot of the disaster relief, but private insurance outright denied in many respects. Like there are certain houses that are on beachfronts where people want to get private insurance, but they say you're too big of a risk, we're not going to give it to you. So if you lose your house, you're on your own. So the government has to step in and insure those houses. And you know who one of the people is that ended up buying into that program where the government insures them and they have a beachfront house? John fucking Stossel. I shit you not. He's spoken about this on air before. He's like, well, gosh, yeah, I'm against it in principle, but sure, I benefit from it, no problem. Look up the word hypocrite, son. Look up the word hypocrite. And then his overall point about the ice rink. You really just use the existence of ice rinks to argue against all regulation. See, this is my problem with the kind of thinking that you get from John Stossel. In his mind, and in a lot of libertarians' minds, the issue is we should have no regulations whatsoever The government should do nothing. And look, the opposite end of the spectrum you could say is communists, where they want everything is government, essentially. And then in their mind, they have the argument about how the state dissolves because everything is the state. So if everything is the state, but that means everything isn't the state and there is no state, we live in a utopian society. Whatever. But either way, these are extreme ways of thinking. The issue is not, should we have no government and no rules at all, or all the government ever and all the rules we could think of? The issue is, what makes sense in the middle? So with ice rinks, for example, it just so happens that that's an area where you don't need that many rules. He acts like liberals are out there arguing that, no, we should have more rules for ice rinks. I've never heard a liberal make that argument ever. It turns out that an ice rink is very simple, and all you need is one rule of go counterclockwise or whatever the fuck it is. But there are other areas in life where you need regulations and you need rules. There is no spontaneous order when it came to how they sell meat in China, where there's totally lax regulation, and they ended up selling rat meat and acted like it was a different kind of meat. You need government officials and regulators to step in and say, oh, this is rat meat. This isn't the meat you're selling it as. Get rid of it. Gone. Or the issue of toxic honey that we import into the U.S. We have honey that we're shipping into the U.S. that has illegal antibiotics that are unsafe in there, and also heavy metals. Now, if you had regulations, then you wouldn't have to worry about people getting heavy metal poisoning 20 or 30 years down the road if they eat a lot of honey. If you have no regulations, people eat this honey that has illegal antibiotics and heavy metals in there. They don't even know that that's what they're eating. And then they get sick years later. They don't even know why. So you need regulators in that respect to stop the illegal antibiotics and the heavy metals. You need people, a cop on the beat looking out for everybody. In John Stossel's mind, he thinks the market needs no cops whatsoever. The market itself needs no regulation whatsoever. And also, look, man, Sam Cedar uses this argument all the time, and I think he's right to do it when he's debating libertarians. He says, dude, you can theorize all you want and philosophize all you want, but when it comes down to it, if there's an earthquake, a bad earthquake, would you rather be in a place that has strict building codes or a place that has no building codes? If the person says no building codes, they're just fucking lying to you. They're just fucking lying to you. I mean, we saw what happened in Haiti. Of course, lax building codes and regulations, and, they're a less developed country, and an earthquake hits, and it's absolute devastation everywhere. Now, of course, you can have devastation in modern nations as well, depending on how bad the earthquake is, but the chances are much better that the buildings aren't going to collapse in on themselves, killing thousands of people, if you have building codes and regulations. But that's the gross, broad thinking that John Stossel engages in. It's no regulations or every regulation anybody's ever thought of. No, John, there's a happy middle ground. You go case by case and you see when a regulation does make sense and when a regulation doesn't make sense. And no, Walmart cannot replace FEMA and do everything that they do. It's impossible, it wouldn't work, and it would be absolutely horrendous.